Was Skate just a summer jam? Or was it Bruno Mars's most personal confession in disguise? Could the groove hide a deeper story no one dared to tell? Before you press play again, you might want to hear the truth behind the smoothest track of his Silk Sonic era. Like, comment, and subscribe to dive deeper into the rhythm, the story, and the soul behind Bruno Mars's Skate. Was Skate really just a feel-good, disco-inspired hit that took us back to the roller rinks of the 70s? Or was it something far more intimate, far more revealing than anyone imagined? When Bruno Mars and Anderson.Paak dropped the second single from their Silk Sonic project in July 2021, the world grooved along instantly. It was silky, sun-kissed, and sounded like a postcard from a time that never felt more alive. But what if the story behind Skate was written with sweat, doubt, heartbreak, and redemption? Before it filled radios and curated playlists, Skate was born from a place of yearning. Not just the yearning to bring funk and soul back to the spotlight, but a deeper craving. Bruno's own battle between joy and creative isolation. After years of standing at the top of the music industry, where could he go next? How could he top the success of To4K Magic, a record that won Album of the Year and stamped his status as a once-in-a-generation performer? The answer wasn't in going higher, it was in going deeper, more honest, more analog, more human. Skate wasn't planned as a single. It wasn't even planned at all. In fact, it started as a throwaway jam session during a quiet, uncertain time when the world stood still and artists, like Bruno, were left to sit with silence. But silence isn't something he's ever been comfortable with, and so he filled it with percussion, bass lines, memories, and the ghosts of the music that raised him. In a small, dimly lit studio in Los Angeles, Bruno Mars sat with Anderson.Paak, talking not about fame or charts, but about roller rinks, broken Walkmans, and the women they once tried and failed to impress with dance moves under neon lights. They weren't trying to write a hit, they were trying to remember who they were before the industry crowned them kings. That night, someone jokingly said, "Imagine if we were skating right now and this was playing in the background." A guitar riff followed, then came a beat. And then, like magic, Bruno started singing. But magic, as it turns out, isn't always spontaneous. It's painful, it's layered, it's stitched together from bruised egos, discarded takes, and moments of insecurity that no one sees. Bruno Mars may smile when he performs, but behind every grin is a perfectionist, haunted by the idea that his best days might be behind him. That's the anxiety he brought into the booth when Skate began to take shape, not to recreate the past, but to prove he still had more to say. And oh, he did. The lyrics of Skate feel simple, almost flirtatious, but listen closely. This isn't just a man inviting someone to ride with him. This is Bruno, in character and in reality, begging for connection, for someone to glide alongside him, to remind him of movement, momentum, and joy. At its core, Skate isn't about roller skates, it's about rediscovering freedom, the kind he lost while trying to be everything to everyone in the industry. The production process was as analog as the song itself sounds. Real drums, real strings, real horns, and real arguments. Bruno has never been shy about how much he demands from his collaborators and from himself. He and Anderson.Paak reportedly spent days just debating how live the drums should sound, whether the percussion should echo like a street performance or feel like a studio session from 1978. The answer: both. Always both. Because Bruno Mars isn't trying to imitate the past, he's building bridges to it. And what came out of that session wasn't just a song, it was a statement. Skate wasn't meant to chart, it wasn't meant to compete, it was meant to liberate. Bruno was done chasing numbers, he wanted to chase feeling. And yet, ironically, Skate did more than perform it. Soar. Within hours of release, the track stormed the global streaming platforms. On YouTube, the video brimming with vintage summer vibes, golden hour lighting, and a diverse cast of roller dancers racked up millions of views. But it wasn't just nostalgia that people were responding to, it was authenticity. For the first time in a long time, a mainstream artist was having fun, not chasing trends, not responding to pressure, just vibing. That resonance carried Skate across charts and into award conversations. Critics praised it as a fresh spin on retro soul, while fans called it the song of the summer. But Bruno wasn't chasing titles anymore. What he was chasing, what he found, was his identity as a creator, without compromise. Still, The success of Skate was no accident. It was a masterclass in world building. The Silk Sonic project as a whole, from its aesthetics to its storytelling, was meticulously crafted. Bruno and Anderson weren't just collaborators, they were curators of a feeling. And Skate was the moment that feeling crystallized. It wasn't the introduction that was leave the door open, and it wasn't the climax that came later with smoking out the window. But Skate was the soul. The moment Silk Sonic stopped being a project and started becoming a movement. But perhaps the most surprising part of the Skate story lies not in its success, but in what it unlocked behind the scenes. According to those close to the Silk Sonic sessions, Skate was the track that changed Bruno's demeanor. Before it, he was tense, overthinking, and unsure if he still had it. After it, he was laughing, dancing in the studio again, even inviting more musicians to jam live rather than over Zoom. In essence, Skate didn't just revive a sound, it revived him. It's easy to forget that even global superstars get lost. Bruno Mars had just come off one of the most decorated runs in pop history. But what no one saw was the quiet fear in the aftermath. How do you stay inspired when you've already achieved everything? Skate was the answer. You don't chase more. You go back. You go deep. You skate through it. The awards came later. So did the sold-out shows. So did the Grammy wins. But none of that mattered as much to Bruno as the feeling he captured when that first bass line hit. He often says he doesn't write songs, he chases moments. Skate was one of those rare moments that became a song. And then, that song became a legacy. In an industry obsessed with numbers and virality, Skate reminded us of something far more essential. Vibe, groove, the kind of unspoken magic that lives between the notes and under the melodies. Bruno Mars didn't just drop a track, he dropped a mood. One that transported millions of listeners not just to another time, but to another version of themselves, carefree, bold, smooth, alive. And as the record spun, and the wheels rolled, Bruno Mars reminded the world of something timeless, that sometimes the most powerful thing an artist can do isn't to reinvent, it's to remember. So the next time you press play on Skate, don't just hear it, feel it. Remember what it means to move without fear, to dance without purpose, to create without compromise. That's what Bruno Mars gave us. Not just a song, not just a summer anthem, but a reason to keep skating forward, no matter how rough the pavement may be. And if you've ever doubted his genius, his heart, or his ability to keep surprising the world, listen again. Because the real story behind Skate isn't what you hear, it's what you feel. And that is where Bruno Mars truly lives. But the story doesn't end there. If anything, the release of Skate was just the beginning of a new chapter, not only for Bruno Mars, but for the way we experience modern music altogether. Because while the song evoked the past with its groove and instrumentation, the emotional depth behind its creation signaled something more powerful, a reawakening. Bruno wasn't just revisiting the golden era of funk and soul, he was reminding the world that music doesn't need to shout to be heard. It just needs to be felt. In countless interviews that followed the Silk Sonic rollout, Bruno Mars was noticeably different. Gone was the overly polished version of himself that many had come to expect from an artist so frequently tied to perfection. In his place stood a man more open, more grounded, and more willing to let the cracks show. He spoke about collaboration not just as a professional necessity, but as a personal salvation. Working with Anderson, Pac didn't just bring new life to the music, it brought new life to Bruno himself. Skate was the heartbeat of that collaboration. Its bounce, its lightness, its understated joy, it all captured what was happening behind the scenes. Two artists, reconnecting with why they fell in love with music in the first place. There were no labels breathing down their necks, no deadlines, no marketing agendas, just rhythm, just laughter, just music. And maybe that's why Skate hit harder than anyone expected, because it was born from freedom, and freedom is contagious. But that kind of freedom comes with a price. Bruno Mars knew that releasing a song like Skate might confuse some fans. It wasn't a power ballad. It wasn't a stadium anthem. It didn't scream for attention. It glided. And in today's hyper-digital landscape, where louder often means better, Skate was a risk. A gentle, nuanced, old-school risk. And yet, it paid off not just in streams or sales, but in impact. Fans around the world began embracing the roller disco fantasy. Skating rinks in major cities started hosting Silk Sonic nights, complete with mirror balls, live DJs spinning funk classics, and even tributes to Bruno and Anderson's iconic stage presence. Social media exploded with videos of couples skating to Skate, families dancing in their living rooms, and even professional skaters choreographing routines to the track. A song that wasn't even meant to be a single suddenly sparked a cultural ripple effect, bringing people together through nostalgia, motion, and joy. But behind the scenes, Bruno was already onto something bigger. Skate was the catalyst that reminded him of his artistic roots, and it gave him the courage to push even further. It wasn't about recreating Silk Sonic indefinitely. It was about embracing reinvention on his own terms. People often ask why Skate didn't dominate the charts in the same way Uptown Funk or 2-4K Magic did. And the answer is simple. It wasn't supposed to. Bruno had already conquered the top. He wasn't climbing anymore. He was carving a new path. Skate wasn't a chart-topping machine, it was a cultural compass. A song that pointed us back toward groove, soul, and simplicity. There's something poetic about how Skate feels like a breeze and yet holds the weight of Bruno's transformation. It doesn't announce itself with grandeur. It doesn't demand your attention. But once you let it in, it stays with you. That's the genius of Bruno Mars. He doesn't just write songs, he writes moments. And Skate is a moment we didn't know we needed until it rolled right into our lives. In the aftermath of Silk Sonic's success, especially following their Grammy sweep and critical acclaim, there was much speculation about what would come next. Would Bruno return to solo music? Would Silk Sonic become a permanent duo? Would the magic of Skate be bottled again? But Bruno remained silent. Not evasive, just intentional. Because when you've reached a level of artistry where every move creates shockwaves, silence itself becomes part of the performance. What few people knew was that Skate had also unlocked something deeply personal in his songwriting process. For years, Bruno had battled with the weight of expectation. With every hit he delivered, another invisible wall rose around him. Fans wanted more, the industry wanted bigger, and critics wanted something new. But Skate was the first time in a long time where he created for himself, not for charts, not for awards, but for his own soul. And in that sacred space of rediscovery, he found peace. Those close to him say that after Skate, his studio sessions became more fluid, more joyful, more experimental. He stopped worrying about trends. He stopped chasing formulas. He began exploring not just new sounds, but new stories. Stories about vulnerability, about loss, about love that fades but never dies, about the complexities of being Bruno Mars, the icon, the perfectionist, the kid from Honolulu who once performed Elvis songs for tourists and now commands stages across the globe. And yet, he remains disarmingly humble. Maybe that's what makes Skate so special. It doesn't try to be more than it is. And yet, it becomes more because of that honesty. It's a smile in the middle of chaos, a groove in the middle of confusion, a light breeze on a heavy day, and in a world overwhelmed with no's, Bruno Mars dared to whisper and we listened. Looking back, Skate might not be remembered as the most commercially successful Bruno Mars song, but make no mistake, it may be one of the most important, because it marked the moment when an artist, beloved and burdened by his own brilliance, chose to glide rather than sprint, chose warmth over spectacle, chose to feel again. So the next time you hear that breezy guitar intro or see the golden hues of the Skate music video, remember this: you're not just witnessing a song, you're witnessing a man reclaiming his joy. And in the end, that's what Bruno Mars has always been about, not just making us dance, but making us feel. One groove at a time. If you believe music should move your soul, not just your body. If you want more stories that peel back the curtain and reveal the heart behind the sound, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Because we're just getting started, and who knows what Bruno Mars might be skating toward next.